Hi, I'm Jeff Murrah. I want to welcome you to True Texas History, where today we are going to be talking about the Fredonian Rebellion. I started it the other day and have a chance today to finish it up. And it's an appropriate day to do it. I mean, December 21st, this is the anniversary of when the Fredonian Declaration of Independence was signed. And with that declaration, the colonists who had joined with the Edwards brothers had gone ahead and declared themselves the Free State of Fredonia, and they were independent of Spanish Mexico at that point. Now, the thing is, when the Old Stone Fort, which is the building in Nacogdoches, was taken, Hayden Edwards was not even in the colony. He did arrive later to direct things. Now, remember, he had spent $50,000 of his own money, and back in the 1820s, that was a lot of money. So Hayden Edwards had a lot on the line with what was going on. And he was in correspondence with some of the other impresarios. Houston was encouraging him to stop what he was doing, that it was going to create problems for many of the other colonists. Now, another person who he was in correspondence with was none other than the filibuster Peter Ellis Bean. And if you've been following the programs, you'll be well aware of who he was. Now, when the Fredonian Rebellion went down, Peter Ellis Bean was called upon by the leaders of Mexico to go ahead and intervene, and he was put in a position. I mean, he didn't want to have to, but he had to. And the Cherokees were caught in a situation. They had allied themselves with the Fredonians, and of course, they cut a deal, and the deal was going to be they were going to take the land of Texas, and it was an east-west line through Nacogdoches, and everything above that line was going to go to the Indians, because the Cherokees and others were upset about how the Spanish had reneged on their promises. And to the south, it would be going to the colonists. Now, the Cherokees were put under pressure, and essentially the two leaders that were involved in developing the alliances with the Fredonians, Cherokees administered tribal justice to them, and they were both killed. And that essentially took the Cherokees out. Because the Fredonians were counting on the Cherokees to be there. Some of the local residents who did not support who did not support Hayden Edwards and what was going on, were scared that the Indians would go on the warpath, and that kept them in check. And then the Fredonians were counting on like 1,500 troops to come in from Louisiana, because Hayden Edwards had built up this story that help was coming from the U.S. from over across the Sabine River. The episode started falling apart. Some of the men that were supposed to guard Nacogdoches, an advanced group had gone out and had put guns and ammunition and whiskey in the hills, and the men drank the whiskey, and they thought that they could take on anything, and they went into town, drove out the remainder of the people that were opposed to Hayden Edwards and stuff, and they made such a big dust storm that the Mexican forces that were approaching thought that this must be all the people from America that were coming for the Fredonians, and they got scared and didn't attack at that point, only to find out later that that wasn't the case, that there were only like 41 of them. But the Mexican forces finally advanced toward the town, and they were able to put down the rebellion because Hayden Edwards and his brother took off along with their supporters back across the Sabine. Okay, it's one of those little episodes that a lot of your history books stop there and they make it sound like that's about all that happened. But the impact of the rebellion was actually pretty widespread. With the government of Mexico, they felt like we've got a threat going on here, and they were suspicious of anything that the Americans were up to. So suspicious that when the American ambassador, Joel Poinsett, and yes, Poinsett is the one that the poinsettia flower is named after, he tried to negotiate the purchase of Texas from Mexico, and Mexico wasn't going to have it at all. In fact, one of their generals, General Terán, had done a tour of the Texas area, and he felt like it was getting too Americanized, and so he put forth the suggestion that they needed to literally Mexicanize Texas and have more Hispanic type names for many locations and significant cities. And so that was another thing that happened. Now, although Stephen F. Austin and some of the other impresarios rose up against Edwards, it did set the stage for Texas independence and some of the movements to come later on. Because the questions raised by the Fredonian episode, they had some significant ones about land ownership and who should have priorities and things such as that. So it did have some far-reaching ramifications, because like I said, Joel Poinsett did try to buy Texas at the orders of President John Quincy Adams. It didn't work out, so instead they kind of set up this started things rolling for some of the treaties and so forth between the U.S. and Mexico, where they kind of stayed off each other's territory. But this episode did bring in Peter Ellis Beans, and that's why I'm glad I covered that filibuster, so that you understood his background before this whole thing blew up. So, although the episode has been forgotten in history, it did have an impact, a long-lasting one, because within the next 20 years, Texas would gain its independence. So, anyways, that will give you a brief overview of Fredonia and the Fredonian Revolution, or Rebellion, depending on how you want to call it. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, concerns, feel free to write them down below. Because it's also interesting, the leaders of the Cherokees, one of them had been educated in London, and, these were not slouch people. So, anyways, until next time, this is Jeff Murrah wishing you vaya con Dios. See you later. Goodbye.